Coming up on the Empowered Woman podcast.
It takes so much energy to show up as someone that we're not, right? And so when we show up authentically at work, not only is it a better, easier experience for ourselves, but really that's what helps to build trust on teams. And I think trust is often seen as this soft bit, but it's such a critical key to healthy culture.
Welcome to the Empowered Woman podcast, the #1 show on visibility strategies for women entrepreneurs. If you want to get empowered to be seen, stand out on social media, stages, TV, and more to make an impact with your voice and business, you're in the right place. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Marcia Spurk, and I'm your host, professional singer and visibility strategist. Welcome again, and let's dive into today's episode. If you're a cultural catalyst, what got you here won't get you there. Cultural change happens through peers at your level, not previous cycles of friends, mentees, or employees. Join our free masterclass, The Science-Backed Secrets to Activate Your Legacy as a Cultural Catalyst Without Burnout. Register at activateherlegacy.com. Hi, Makayla. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Marta. Excited to be here.
Yes, me too. So we've known each other for a while. I am having the pleasure of working with you and learning more about your story and getting to share it on stages and your expertise and how you support clients. But why don't you kick us off and tell us who you are and what you do?
Yes, so I'm Makayla Greathouse, and I founded Elevate Intent, which is a fractional head of people and HR advisory practice. Essentially, we go in and architect people practices with intention. And said simply, we take all the ad hoc pieces of the employee experience and create a cohesive system that drives performance and accountability.
I love that. And I love the name of the company too. But I love a backstory. So that's where we're going to go next. I would love to hear how you got into this, why it's such a passion, and that you decided to start your business.
Yeah, so I have been in HR for about a decade and a half. And I mean, work is where we spend the majority of our lives for most of us. And so creating a space where people can show up, be authentic, be excited to be at work is something that's always been important to me. And two, in conjunction, I've been teaching yoga for a decade. And so this really is kind of the meeting of the minds of what was two pieces, the HR side and really the mindfulness side, and bringing them together to allow for intentionality.
I love that combination and bringing that into other companies as well.
Yeah.
I know there's a big piece of your work that has to do with vulnerability and bringing more of the person into work. And in one of our conversations, you actually recommended a book that I am super enjoying that talks about the importance of humor and levity in our work. Can you speak more about that? Because I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes so much energy to show up as someone that we're not, right? And so when we show up authentically at work, not only is it a better, easier experience for ourselves, but really that's what helps to build trust on teams. And I think trust is often seen as this soft bit, but it's such a critical key to healthy culture. And really, trust is something I harp on and talk about in everything that I do. And I get a lot of what I talk about from Patrick Lencioni, and he's a leadership expert that talks about trust being the foundation of driving business results on teams and organizations. And so showing up authentically, and a lot of times that does allow for levity, for humor, is what helps us to build that foundation.
I love that. Thank you for reminding us because it's easy to get caught up in, oh, we need to be professionals and we need to be stiff and
Yeah.
you can't really show your true colors, but that's what builds trust. I mean, in any relationship, and why would it be different in a professional setting as well? So as you're working with these companies, what have you noticed in terms of what is the biggest roadblock in terms of when they're scaling? What is something that you feel like it's missing as companies are growing, or maybe the reason why they're not growing?
Yeah. I mean, I think a large piece of that is trust. I'm going to talk about this from two angles, one being trust and one being the level of leadership involvement. And so when I say trust, what I mean is not providing clarity to the point where people are left to like wonder or deduce on their own, like what is expected of me here? And I can give you a couple of examples of what that might look like across the employee experience. So picture this, you're at a scrappy startup, and at inception there wasn't a need to have an onboarding program, right? People were coming in just based on everyday conversations. You were getting all the information that you had to, right? But once you get to a point of like 20 employees, it's important to have that intention there. And that's what really builds trust at the beginning of an employee experience, so that I'm not going into a company and trying to figure things out. Like, that is the opportunity a company has to get the employee to rally, to be stoked on the mission and vision and advocate of the company. And so without that intentionality in the employee experience, that trust is lost. And I think about too, like later performance, there gets to be a point where role clarity is absolutely critical. I mean, if we look at, hey, I'm Joe and Susie got promoted and I don't understand why, it begins to create this mistrust and resentment and a hyper focus on that lack of understanding. So that's kind of piece one. And I think piece two, when I say leadership involvement, it's this almost continuum of like trust to inspection, right? How deep in the weeds do I need to be as a leader to allow for autonomy without that seeming like micromanagement?
Okay. I love that. The differences between when you're just starting out a company, and we know this even as a solopreneur, you're doing everything yourself. Like, let's talk about that. You don't
Yeah.
really need a whole lot of systems because everything is in your head, but we all know that as soon as you bring one team member, they have no idea what's going on. You're going to have to pass it on. And it may be easy because you're in the beginning, so there's not a whole lot going on. They can even help you with some, like when you're thinking of virtual assistant. But then as you start growing, like you said, people come on in. They shouldn't be the ones figuring out on their own. And that helps them really feel that connection with the company too, like what you're saying in the culture, if you do the work ahead of time in creating all of those expectations and really the guidelines for everything. So I love that. You mentioned leadership. Can you tell us more? Because I know it's just such an overarching term, like you are a leader. What does what does that actually mean, and what is leadership behavior, leader's behavior that is helpful, or that maybe someone like what you're saying, a leader needs to micromanage, right? Maybe they have that misconception. It's like not really, because that's not based off of trust. So talk to us more about that.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's this school of thought is there's leaders that are at the top of an organization, right? And then there's managers that manage the day to day. But I think everyone, individual contributor or someone that manages people, has the opportunity to show up as a leader. And what really cultivates the culture is what each individual leader, as I just defined, or not, shows up through what they tolerate, through what they reward, and through what they repeat. And so that to me is what defines leadership, and going into the behaviors that kind of help to cultivate this trust, right? I think about this almost in a triangle model. And taking it back to geometry and thinking about an equilateral triangle, each point represents something. And those 3 points are autonomy, alignment, and accountability. And I think the role of a leader is to keep these three things balanced, right? And so you need to have alignment, like what is the why? What is the purpose that we're here? Going back to that onboarding example. And am I able to get my teams on board to disagree and commit? Like, we are aligned on this, we're moving forward. And that allows for employees to have autonomy, for me as a leader to know when I really need to get into the weeds versus like, let me step back here and let someone shine. And once we have those two pieces, Marta, that allows for accountability, which is how an organization drives results, right? Like, you know your role, you know your why. Now I can hold you accountable to that. And that's not this scary, big, mean thing, right? That's a part of our day to day.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. The triangle imagery is really helpful. Like they're all equally important, and they feed off of each other, right? You can't have one without the other. And once you have one in place, the other one starts appearing. So that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So for somebody out there that's listening to us that has a company that may want support with their team, what does it actually look like to work with you, like from the beginning process? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, yes. So I start out by having a discovery call and understanding what the current state looks like. So what are your business goals? How are you driving to achieve them? What does the culture engagement look like? So on and so forth. And from there, can have a further conversation on what Elevate Intent could do to create that cohesive system across the board.
Okay, awesome. So they can reach out to you via your website, which we'll have that in the show notes, and learn more, and then book a call and talk about their specific situation and how you can come in and support.
Exactly,
Love it.
exactly.
Do you have any stories? I know you mentioned, the scenario earlier of this company in the early stages and then as they start to grow. Are there any other stories that you can share about, how applying some of the principles that you have mentioned has made a difference and how that played out? Hey, let me ask you a question. Would you like to be my next guest on the Empowered Woman podcast? Do you have a story you'd like to share? Want more visibility for your business on a show ranked in the top 0.5% in the world? Well, then head on over to martasburke.com/podcast guest for more information.
Yeah, that's a good question, Marta. I think it really is these principles, these ideas being modeled. And
Mhm.
so I think it's easy to sit here and talk about it, right? And
Yeah.
say, here's what works. But I've worked with founders that really exemplify this in their day to day. And what I mean by that is they say, here's what we want the behaviors to look like at the company. Here's the core values. And that's not just something that's stuck on a wall. That's something that they're able to explain and how decisions are made each day. And I think that is a hugely powerful tool to help to cultivate trust at the organizational level. And so that's one example of how founders can really set this up to scale longer term versus kind of like having these disjointed systems that create confusion and lack of clarity.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, when you spoke about when we're talking about leadership and what a leader means, I also want to add in the role of women, right? Because then you think, where do women come in, and what are some of the strengths, or what are some of the expectations in the workforce? And since this is the Empowered Woman podcast, and you are a woman, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, on how this translates for women.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I want to go back to authentic leadership, right? And women feeling comfortable to show up in the workplace as they are. I think a lot of times women are praised for being dependable or composed or capable under pressure. And I think that feeling the pressure to show up like that and doing so kind of end up creating a ceiling. And so, what I mean by that is it can look like dependability turning into teach the organization to lean on you instead of listening to your recommendations, and ultimately kind of making you a chaos absorber. And I say that because I'm guilty. I am so guilty of that, of being someone who kind of just takes it and continues to fix it versus being someone that can redesign the system. And I think when I think about, this almost what feels like a requirement sometimes to show up as composed, that's something that can turn into silence, which is assumed as agreement. And that's what we get rewarded for sometimes, right? And as leaders, we have a job, we have a role to create a little bit of friction and to challenge the status quo and engage in healthy conflict. And it's hard to step into that role of challenger sometimes and be willing to disrupt what's no longer working. So I think as a leader, a high level leader, the job ends up shifting and we have to embrace that and show up authentically to do that.
That makes so much sense. Being willing to step out and to get uncomfortable yourself, potentially make people a little bit uncomfortable too. Um,
Exactly.
and that's, again, going back to relationships, we do that in life as
Mhm.
well. So why wouldn't it show up in our professional work? Something that's coming up for me, because I'm such a geek on personality types. And I've done all the tests, all the frameworks. I find it fascinating. What is your take on this, like in working with people and especially leaders? Because for some of them, it may be easier to be that stern person. And then for others, it may be easier to be the silent one and be like, oh, yeah, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
What is, you think that what are the biggest challenges there depending on, the way they're raised and just who they are, but also what are some of the tools or some of the things that they can leverage to bypass that.
Yeah. Good question. And my mind goes to two things here. You mentioned assessments. Personally, I think one of the strongest assessments in the workplace is the DISC assessment.
Okay.
And DISC is a communication assessment. And so it's easily applicable to organizations. And there's 4 different styles, hence DISC, 4 letters. But that helps you to see where you are and what your blockers in communicating with other styles might look like. So it still allows for that like authentic communication, but you're able to be a little bit more intentional about, all right, I'm a little bit more of a soft communicator or a cheerleader communicator, and I'm speaking to someone tomorrow that's really direct. So how might I shape my communication, still getting my message across to make sure that it's clear and that it lands and resonates, right? And I think part 2 there is situational leadership. We can't, and we don't show up all the time in the same way. We need to almost diagnose and think a little bit for that intentionality and how we're going into situations, again, to make sure that it's landing and that it's resonating.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So not changing who you are, but being aware of who you're talking to so that it lands a little bit easier, but also being aware of what the situation requires. And it's just awareness through and through.
Exactly.
Comes with practice. I know you have something coming up. I'd love to hear more about it.
Yes. So on February 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern, I am hosting a live session called The Human Advantage. And in that session, we're going to be talking about designing culture beyond values decks. So how do you really build an operating rhythm that supports the culture? We're going to be talking about building trust that accelerates execution, and then leadership patterns that can quietly cap growth. It should be an awesome discussion.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So you'll have the link for registration for us as well. We'll put that in the show notes. I love that term, the human advantage. I think it's a mouthful. So conceptually, and I know you just broke down a little bit more about what you're going to be talking about in that event, but can you share with us what you mean by that for people that maybe not familiar with the term?
Absolutely. We are in this absolute revolution of robotics, and we're turning to AI for speed, efficiency, output, right? But that foundational layer of what is human, like going back to building the trust, the relationships, that's huge. Like AI is going to speed, scale output, but it will not build trust, translate culture into behavior, or design execution capacity.
So in other words, AI can't replace us.
Nope. Not our judgment and our people skills.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. So we need to know what our advantage is and to leverage AI because it is helpful, right?
Yes.
But also know what we have going on that is very unique and that we can leverage, especially in the workplace and our professional lives. I love that. Well, before you tell us how people can connect with you, I love asking all of my guests my $1 million question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So, Makayla, what is an empowered woman to you?
I think I'm just going to keep on theme here, Marta. An empowered woman is someone that shows up authentically as her full self and is able to act as a leader, whatever that looks like, right? As a mom, super mom in the workplace, day to day, across friends, families, hobbies. So I think it's someone that just has the courage, because the world is hard right now, to show up as herself.
Yes, the world is hard to show up as yourself. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, but in conversations like this, like what we're having, that's how we can be reminded of, okay, well, I get to show up more authentically and I will be loved and appreciated by the right people for it.
Exactly.
So that's wonderful. Well, tell us how people can connect with you. Remind us of all the things and anything else you want to add.
Yes. Anyone can reach out directly to me at Makayla.Greathouse at elevateintent.co, or check out my website and contact me through their elevateintent.co.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing out there in supporting companies and their teams. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Marta. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope this episode empowered you. And if you enjoyed the show, please join the Empowered Woman community on Facebook and share with friends, or leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover this empowering message. Until next time, bye.